Welcome back to Washington Journal. I'm joined now by Representative John Rutherford. He's on the Appropriations Committee and he represents Florida's 5th District. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mimi. Good to be with you.
So the White House leadership meeting between President Biden and congressional leaders on the debt ceiling was postponed. It was postponed today. It's now been postponed to sometime early next week. What are you hearing? Why was it postponed?
Well, what I was hearing was that some of the members that need to be in that meeting to have it productive were not going to be there. So now who that was, I don't know, but that's just what we're hearing.
So what are you looking for from those negotiations, from that discussion?
Well, look, I think we've passed a bill. You know, the Republicans have now raised the debt ceiling. We passed a bill to do just that. It will raise it $1.5 trillion. It's got a $4.8 trillion cut, you know, through limiting spending, saving some of the money that's already out there, and then also growing the economy. And when you look at, particularly, for example, on some of the savings, there's $50 to $60 billion of COVID money that has been sitting in accounts for 2 years now. If they haven't used it in 2 years, I'm going to say they don't need it, and we can pull that back and use that as a savings for the American taxpayer.
Well, let's take a look. We'll put it on the screen as to what the House GOP debt ceiling plan consists of. As you said, so raise the debt ceiling into a 2024, reduce spending to fiscal 2022 levels, limit future spending growth to 1% annually, recover unspent COVID-19 funds, right. New work requirements for recipients of federal aid, claw back IRS funds, block student debt cancellation, and reform energy permitting and repeal green energy programs. Are you fully on board on all of that?
Absolutely, and I think about 87% of the American public is as well. And you know, to just give an example on the talking about moving the budget back to the 22 numbers, all we're asking to do is move spending back to where it was just 5 months ago under the Biden administration's budget. So it's, you know, I don't think that's unreasonable at all to say we're going to spend down what we were spending 5 months ago.
So a lot of this has to do with President Biden's priorities about green energy and student debts and increasing enforcement at the IRS. Is it possible to negotiate on those things? Do you think that this can actually happen?
Well, only if the president will come to the table, right? I mean, and since I think February 1st, Speaker McCarthy has been trying to get the president to the table. It's 101 days now, but the bill that we passed is just a starting point. That's a negotiation.
And if you would like to call in and ask a question for Congressman Rutherford, you can do so on our lines by party affiliation. Democrats 202-748-8000. Republicans 202-748-8001 and Independents 202-748-8002. He'll be with us until the top of the hour, 8 o'clock Eastern time. If the president, if there's no deal reached, would you be willing to let the United States default?
I'm not willing to, and I hope the president's not willing to.
But if he says, I'm not going to make these cuts, pass a clean bill, and then we'll discuss the cuts.
I don't think any.
Would you be willing to go along with that?
He's always negotiated for debt ceiling raises, back in 17, 19, I think, even back when he was a senator. So what's different now?
But
come to the table and let's negotiate.
But Congress did pass clean debt ceiling increases during the Trump administration.
They did.
So what's the difference now?
Well, the difference now is they've just spent $6 trillion over the last couple of years. And inflation is at a 40-year high. We weren't facing inflationary issues then like we are now. That's why we have to have these cuts. And you can't just continue to spend more and give the government a greater and greater ability to increase the debt without bringing back some of this spending.
Well, Congressman, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries held a press conference yesterday. He was asked about a couple of things, including President Trump's town hall comments about the debt ceiling and House Republicans' approach to that negotiation. And I'll get your response.
On default, at this town hall last night, the former president said to Republican congressmen and senators, if they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default. I wonder how you think that affects the discussions you're having about trying to avoid that outcome.
Well, it's unfortunate because there are a lot of extreme MAGA Republicans in the House right now who share the same position that former President Trump articulated, which is that the American people either need to absorb dramatic, extreme, right-wing ideological cuts to things like Medicaid benefits for disabled children and seniors, older Americans who are in nursing homes, that the American people are expected to absorb dramatic cuts to health care funding that could result in millions of people losing their health coverage. The American people are expected to absorb dramatic cuts to food insecurity programs when there are more than 30 million Americans who are currently food insecure. The American people are expected to absorb dramatic cuts to education funding and to public safety funding. Or if Democrats do not bend the knee to this extreme MAGA Republican Default on America Act, Republicans are saying the other option is to default. That's exactly what President Trump laid out last night. And we've been saying that from the very beginning. It's an inherently unreasonable position.
That's the House Minority Leader speaking yesterday. Congressman, your reaction?
Well, he left out the biggest lie, which is veterans. We're going to cut veterans too. We're not cutting Medicare. We're not cutting Medicaid. None of those cuts are in the list that you saw. They're nowhere in that bill. These dramatic cuts, these MAGA cuts as he calls them, simply do not exist yet. Nobody has said where all these cuts will be. We're simply rolling back to 2022, the president's prior budget that was existing just 5 months ago. We're not cutting vets. We're not cutting medicine. We're not cutting food. I just believe that's a talking point for them, trying to force us to a clean debt ceiling.
And you're also protecting defense spending. So that will not be cut. Vets won't be cut, or benefits, I should say.
Correct, yeah, veteran benefits.
Which means all the cuts will fall disproportionately to all the other programs. Isn't that correct? So they would have more extreme cuts?
Yeah, but there are certainly areas that we can save money. I don't think anybody doubts that within our government. So going back to where the budget was 5 months ago is not a dramatic or drastic cut.